Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Take. I'm your host, Krishna Mano, and I'm extremely excited for this episode, where we'll be talking with the Global Vice President of Impact at Steelcase and the author of the best-selling book, You Belong Here. Please welcome to the show, Kim Dabbs. Ms. Dabbs, thank you so much for joining us for this interview. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
So could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do today?
That's a complex question in the world today. I am a Korean-born American adoptee that currently lives in Munich, Germany. I have spent a lifetime really working to build cultures of belonging throughout multiple communities in the nonprofit sector and in public policy, and now in the corporate sector, working for a company called Steelcase. My role at Steelcase now is leading our impact work, which are our commitments to the well-being of people and planet in all of the places that we live and work throughout the globe. So it's been a beautiful journey.
For sure. Thank you so much. And with this background that you've described of having, three different places of national origin, how has this cross-cultural life shaped your understanding of what it means to belong or feel included in the world today?
Yeah, I think having so many different unique identities has growing up, being young, has always made me feel like I don't belong. People remind me what I'm not before they see me for what I am. And so, struggling and grappling with that my entire life, it's given me a different lens to see the world, a different lens to be able to do that inner work and show up in ways that protect me and other people, and has really shaped my entire journey.
For sure. And were there any specific instances in your childhood where you fully understood that maybe you don't belong or others don't perceive you as someone to be included?
Yeah, I think don't even have to have a background as complex as mine to have felt that way. I think everyone has experienced exclusion, where you walk into a room and you think to yourself, I don't belong here. And your body almost feels it before your brain can even process it. You don't have the words. And whether that be the first day of school, whether that be an interaction with someone in the community, or whether that be in a family, everyone knows what that feels like. And we all do the best that we can to work through those experiences of exclusion. And then over time, you realize that you have the power and position and privilege to be able to design experiences where people don't feel that way. And I think that's the role of each of us as leaders and individuals.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing. And you're also the author of the book, You Belong Here. And specifically throughout this book, you discuss a lot of these life experiences that you've had before, in which, you talk about your unique perspective as a person with all of these different parts to their identity. So first of all, what does the title of this book, You Belong Here, mean to you personally, and why did you choose it for this book?
Yeah, when writing a book, sometimes the title is one of the last things that you find.
Right.
And I think after doing the research and going through it, I would say a lot of people, when they see that, at first glance, it looks like you are asking others to grant you the permission to belong. And what I take readers through in the book is just a belonging journey that helps people understand that the inner work that each of us needs to do, when we can understand our identities and when we can root in our own experiences, you belong here, but you belong everywhere if you belong to yourself first.
Definitely. Thank you. And so one of the main topics that you covered throughout this book are the four different identities that we carry on a daily basis, which has essentially become a key part of your message of how people can feel included in groups. Specifically, these are the lived, learned, lingering, and loved identities. So could you please share with the audience a few examples of how these have played out over the course of your life with real world applications?
Yeah. Um, I think of this belonging journey, our identities too. We look at them as something as fixed, and they're actually incredibly fluid. They change over time. Who I am with you here in this moment today is going to be different a year from now because of the choices and the life and the world that we live in. And so the first identity I take people through is your lived identity. These are things that we inherit when we're born, things that we can't change. I can't change the fact that I was born in Seoul, Korea. That's just part of my origin story. I can't change the fact that I was born into poverty. Um, uh, but your relationship with what you inherit and the origin stories that you hold actually become fuller over time when you can actually see those aspects, the cultural context, understanding the world at that moment. Your learned identity, those are things that we choose. I chose to work in this sector. I chose to do impact work. I chose to live in Germany. I chose to go to school at the places I went to school. And a lot of times, these parts of our identity, they show up in bios, they show up in introductions, um, but we don't always spend the time really questioning or trying to understand deeper the choices we have, the systems we live in, and then where those choices are readily accessible to others, what things were choices, what things were mandates. And so understanding that part of our identity is critically important. And then, you talked about feeling like you don't belong. That's when we feel those ways, when we are put in situations that don't feel safe. Um, that's when I like to think of our lingering identity starts to emerge. And these are these old stories we tell ourselves about who we are and where we belong. I'm too opinionated. I'm too loud. I'm too quiet. All of these I'm to's that we carry with us that have been repeated over time and how society and others have interacted with us. And so I urge readers to really start to take a deep look at those stories we've crafted, the stories we repeat, and then those stories that really start to emerge in those moments where our identities are questioned. And so when you're able to do that, like understand your origin stories, really see the choices that you make and the choices that others have made for you, and you rewrite those old stories, that's when you can get to an identity that you love. That's our loved identity. That's where we can really step into who we are fully and understand all of those things that make us uniquely us. And that's a journey that doesn't have a beginning or an end. It just is a part of constantly doing that inner work for ourselves.
Definitely. And I think my favorite one out of those four is definitely the loved identity because it kind of gives you a path for the future of there, there's always more work to do despite what you've already done. So thank you so much for sharing that. And also throughout the book, you often refer to the psychological concept of human nature to divide people into us versus them. And the most obvious example of this happening is in the modern world with political and media polarization, but this also influences the culture in the workplace and at schools, as you've described. So you describe your transformational journey from building bridges instead of burning them, as people generally tend to do. So how can all people learn to do the same for a more loving and inclusive society?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. And I love that you're asking that question and um, searching for those types of answers. Because I think, especially at this moment in time, our schools, our workplaces, we are going to be surrounded by people that aren't exactly like us. We can't curate that information and that feed. we have to learn how to communicate and communicate with humanity, really honoring those identities that everyone holds in the everyday interactions. So I think things like rituals and norms and community agreements, things that you can do to really level set with an entire team or with a community to say, hey, we can disagree. We can radically disagree about something. But when we communicate about it, we can challenge ideas, but we're not going to challenge people. We're not going to challenge people based on their identity because all of those unique lived experiences and learned experiences that people bring to a conversation actually make any type of solution richer and more beautiful for everyone involved.
Definitely. And have you seen, your work around more inclusive messaging have a serious impact on your own team or the people at Steelcase where you work? And how has, those ideas been implemented into your workplace?
Yeah, I would say it's a yes and. Just as much kind of study and research that I've done around the topic of belonging has also been informed by this beautiful community that we have of people throughout the world, whether that be across cultures, whether that be just our small team that we have and we meet with on a regular basis. Um, Building norms, creating clarity, ensuring that we foster inclusion in everything that we do. We see it at the policy level, but we also see it in practice, whether that be, a coaching model for each leader to have with a team member on a regular basis, being clear about the pillars of leadership and how we want people to show up in the workplace and the world so we can communicate and solve problems with humanity. All of those have been such great learning moments and moments for me as an individual and as a leader, but for the company um, to actually learn and grow as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And when we're looking at a broader perspective of humanity, we see that a lot of people today, as you address in the book, are under the assumption that, there's no point in changing yourself if everything around you is still going to stay the same. And they believe that individuals can't be change makers. And honestly, the current environment only discourages them to do so. So when you talk about how inner work is systems work, as you call it, how do you instill a sense of change in an individual who has always thought of themselves as powerless and seen a society in which, they're told that they're weak?
Yeah, we all have we all have such gifts. We all hold power, whether that be in the daily relationships that we have in the home or in the workplace or in schools. Our ability to build strong relationships actually starts to really multiply and cascade throughout a team, throughout a building, throughout an organization, throughout a community. Um, so much of what we do matters, and those everyday actions, I think, are undervalued. But when you, as an individual, have an interaction with someone and you walk away and you feel seen and heard and valued, your day changes. How you show up in those moments change. And we can't underestimate the micro in service of the macro because it's going to take millions and millions and millions of those small interactions to build trust, to fuel transparency around how cultures move and how cultures grow. Some of the smallest things that we can do every day have a cascading impact on people's lives. And I just encourage people, like, you don't have to do everything everywhere all at once. But think about those one or two things that you can do every single day to make things just a little bit better for those around you.
Definitely, thank you. And we kind of addressed this earlier in the interview, but in today's political climate especially, we see a lot of major corporations are feeling the need to step away from, equity-based policies that initially did bring a diverse array of perspectives to the workplace and to schools and, just places of learning. So what are the risks of reversing these explicit attempts towards increased inclusion, and how can corporations combat the pressure that they're facing from any other party and those in power?
Yeah. Oh, I wish I had the answer for that one. I think that's the answer everyone's looking for. all I can say is, um, personally, my heart is hurting in this moment. And even if policies aren't changing within companies, and you see this, so many companies throughout the country are actually keeping their policies and keeping with progress. Um, but it doesn't always feel that way. And so I think, the voice of individuals is powerful. Um, I think collective impact is going to be the answer to how we get to the other side of this. And it's an opportunity for all of us to come together to say, okay, how do we actually ensure access to opportunity for everyone? What is that going to look like? Where do we invest? Where do we see gaps? And how do we continue the momentum forward? And that's the only way. That's the only way we're going to continue to thrive and grow. Um,
Absolutely.
we're all different. We all have unique identities, every single one of us. And I see that across the world in all of these different companies and all of these different communities where we live and work. And each one of those voices matter. And I
Definitely.
think rooting in those core values is going to be critical to getting to the other side.
For sure. Thank you so much. And to hopefully wrap this interview off in a lighter note, the essential work that you do today is obviously based on those who have promoted increased understanding among one another before, whether they be social activists or corporate leaders like yourself. So, who is someone that has served as an inspiration for you, and how do you try to embody their message in your everyday life?
Mhm. A great question. I think it's a lot of different people over time. It's not just one person. It could be change makers that I know, and in rural Romania, it could be change makers that I know in downtown New York. But I think the people that inspire me most are the people closest to the impact in our communities every single day. In this moment, they're working twice as hard with half the amount of resources. And I think, what can we do to show up for them as leaders, for them as organizations, and especially to people that they serve? Because we're all here and we're all together and supporting the progress every single day.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Ms. Dabbs, for joining us on the show today and providing us with your unique perspective.
Oh, thanks for the invitation. I really enjoyed it.